Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is Jonas Reporters for the 11th of April. And well, we had another exciting day. Again, above that 26.1650. It sounds like a broken record because we've been stuck in this range for so long. You know, you're bullish, but we keep hitting the same resistance here right at the 38. And you can see it's proven to be a, solid line. Keeping price pretty much caught in that range. And we don't have anything really significant happening from an algo activity. I mean, last time we had significant behavior was right over here, right before the dip, and on the return. And then most recently, we started to get some activity right around here, but it just wasn't enough to significantly follow through to create a similar type burst. And that's exactly what that orange really dictates to us. It shows us that we just don't have an impetus for anything dramatic. This is just normal back and forth action. Quite a range. You see that ATR at the bottom of that was 61. That is huge. We can see that the NQ though is stronger because it's been above the 23, been above the 38, closed above it, and now using that as a support line going through. If we look at what the number 6581 is, the 38 percent line there. So it's got a little bit more, I guess you would say, support to it. The rising euro has been dramatic here. It's an interesting thing because there really isn't any justification for it other than devaluation of the dollar to some degree. You can see that we've had just a horrible shakeout readings, and yet it's just maintained this range. And so it's always an indication of central bank behavior because it's relatively monotone within this range. And of course, you hear them talk about price coordination for exchange rates below. There's another way of saying they're fixing it. So it is what it is, and you just follow where it's at. Bonds still holding up quite well, given the fact that you still have a much stronger presence for equities, but I think there's just some skittishness with the war footing, the potential of a strike, and that in Syria, it unsettles the market, and rightfully so. And then, of course, you had the trade war issue, which really was not much of an issue, but just a negotiating ploy, and the Chinese have agreed to be cooperative to some degree. We'll see if that actually translates anything. And you can see oil right there at the peak. So again, this is going to be inflationary going forward. You would expect that's going to drive gold and other commodity-based assets higher. And I'm still in the middle range. I mean, it's been rising shakeout for a while, but this has just really been pretty much erratic. You just now have cyan under red, which is always a buy, always. No ifs, ands, ors. In the interesting circle of Bitcoin, you had that big pump when it was talked about the Rothschilds and Soros and them getting into Bitcoin and that, or cryptocurrencies in general as a trading vehicle. And then you had, of course, some regulation news that drove it right back down. And it's trading in range here, but it's been pretty effective. Now, we had quite an exciting day on the ES. And you can see this is quite a range. We started with our peak. I'm going to have to enlarge this anyway, so we'll just scroll back a little ways here. And we can see how the peak run up there when we had the news about China skyrocketed everything early on in the mornings from the buy signals way back. And this was off a really nice basing configuration. We had a deep algo move right down here that led to the first buy, and then you ended up with a second one where it did the same thing, and that was just exaltation. We had some soft in-between readings. Of course, here you had the rising gold, which always looks for the highs going into there, and that's exactly what happened. When you're above the 50%, when below the 50%, you look for the lows. And this is where it started to get interesting, and where I wanted to point out some key trading aspects. The cyan line right here, what this represents is just positive extreme. So this was the start of algo activity in what we would call not overbought, but just exuberant, and where the beginning of the algo takes place. And we look for that because it becomes a great retrace on dropping price tags. Now here, we have two situations that on the DOC right down here in the shakeout that look identical and are completely not the same. And I think they're beautiful indications of the power of what I've been talking about from this gold rising, that it above the 50% indicates a move towards the highs, where, you know, even if you're lower now, obviously if you're already at the highs, yes, it indicates you might see higher highs, but it gets a little bit less pronounced as far as its effect. But here you have a DOC spread, which is the cyan moving above red. At the same time, you have green crossing below, you have steel crossing down. You know, all intents and purposes, this is what you would look for as a short signal of strength. The problem you've got is the signal came in at a time where you have rising of both the gold, blue, and the azure lines, and while it did produce a little teeny bit of it, it wasn't much, and then you had an immediate turnaround of the shakeout right here. However, moving on to the second signal right here, which is really where the short signal came in, flatline, and actually the beginning of a decline in the gold, and this one actually produced not only a return to the 50%, but then you ended up with a secondary DOC spread that took place right in about over here. You had to wait for the dip in the shakeout before it began, right there at the 56, and then that one led to a significant decline going forward. But important distinction, because that the power of that gold rising in there really can create a momentum that has to ease off, and sometimes you just have to wait, and that's what just led to this back and forth across at the highs. In fact, it led to a tiny break up here into the highs right before a keen short, and this was a pretty decent move even from the 50% dip, and then again the secondary option from an even weaker shakeout near higher highs, and that one produced a dramatic decline. You went from 57 all the way down to 36, so it was a good 20-point move. And then we ended up with a nice buy with the deep algo move right here at the cross above the 23%. And then that one proceeded, and of course what was interesting about this is from the short target here, I had a target that wasn't just the 50%, I had the retrace of the positive extreme all the way down here at the 26.45 range, and usually I look for about 80% of that. So I mean, this one satisfied it, wouldn't dip below the 38%, and this one clearly met it exactly and kept going. Whether you took the extra distance didn't matter. It was an excellent move going down, and then you had a significant move back up. It was a bit more erratic, and this is the interesting thing about the declines. Your declines are 66% faster than your rises, and you can kind of see that if you just look at the length of bars from here to here versus from here, to getting back up to the highs is about twice as long a time period. But again, here we had the rising gold, which was suggesting that we were going to be moving back to the highs, and then of course you ended up with these great dips, and you're like terrified, and you say, no, it's a failure, and then no, you make new highs. So just goes to point it out. And then we came across with someone. This was quite a long day of serious action, and then we got towards the end of the day again, DOC spread, but on rising shakeout you have to wait for the first lower bar, which took place right about here at 64.50. And we've been in a short signal ever since 64.50, and we're back down to 43, so another 20 points. So you're getting these powered 20-point moves up and down, and great effective ranges. So very exciting from that standpoint, and it's just a matter of following the signals. It was a little tough in between some of these when you get the DOC in the middle, and that's where you just have to follow shakeout, and then of course we had here long short algo are listed here, and then any ABM resets as they take place when they do. Otherwise they become your ceiling points, and then they reset, and that just depends on how effective the signals are. So all in all, good action. I'll continue to post relevant charts, but I wanted to go over that setup with the gold and how the differences are on which one was a certainly higher probability short in what appear to be identical readings, but they're very different when you look just right here, and you can see those differences clearly. So it's worth noting that what looks the same under various conditions can be very different and have certainly bigger implications from a risk to reward as well as profit factor. So hopefully that helps. As always though, trade well. We'll talk to you later.